So I just wanted to share some quick thoughts. I've been thinking about AAU basketball a lot in the summer, and I share a lot of videos and talk a lot about how AAU is kind of, I guess, not bad, but kind of ruining the off season for players. And so I kind of wanted to expound on that a little bit, um, and just kind of give my thoughts on that. So it just, and this might just be a Utah thing. I've heard it's a little bit different in other states. So if anything, this goes out to Utah parents. But I'm sure there's parents everywhere that kind of do the same thing, make the same mistake. But there is such thing as an off season, and that off season should last longer than 2 weeks after the season ends, before you start to, go full speed again, playing multiple games a week. The off season's important, right? It's good to take a break, not only physically but mentally. Be able to take a break from the grind of the season where you're practicing every day and playing every day. And that doesn't mean we're going to take time completely off of basketball, right? We're always going to want to be improving our skills and building our skill set, but there is such thing as an off season. And I think a lot of players and parents aren't actually having an off season, and I think it's hurting their players' development. So when we talk about the off season, we're talking about not playing too many games, and if we are playing games, playing unstructured games, so that we have the opportunity to explore, to try new things, and really focus on skill development and not necessarily learning how to play in an offense. And I think that's kind of the mistake that a lot of players and parents are making. Are when you go to AAU tournaments and you're playing on a team, you're playing as part of an offense, right? Your team has a philosophy, and you're trying to learn how to play with 4 other players on the court, which is great, right? You need that. That's what playing is for. And again, I'm not saying you shouldn't do any AAU stuff. You definitely should be doing some AAU stuff. But I think players and parents take it over the top sometimes. And a good example is there's plenty of players I've trained who are coming throughout the year, and then the season ends, it gets to summer, school's out, and in my mind it's, okay, now we have a lot of extra time, now we can get more skill development, we can do more dribbling, more shooting. They don't have to go to school, so they have time to rest in between workouts so they can do more, and that's kind of my mindset. But I have so many players that are just out of town for the entire month of June and even July as well, that they're going and playing tournaments every single week. And again, I don't want to make it sound like tournaments are bad, but too many tournaments is definitely a bad thing, because there's that time that you're taking not only to drive there. Sometimes you're driving 6 to 10 hours to get to a tournament. That time could be better spent working on developing your skills, right? So even if you just took half of the driving time and spent 5 hours working on your handles or your shooting, that would be so much more beneficial than driving so far, spending that time in between games just waiting and resting, to playing a game where you're only going to have the ball in your hands for a couple minutes. And that's what I think parents forget is, yes, you're playing a lot of games, so you're playing a lot of basketball, but the actual time with the ball in your hands is very minimal when you're playing a game. And especially if you're not the number one guy on the team. That guy will get a lot of minutes, a lot of shots. But most players will only get 5 to 6 shots at the most during a game. So they're not actually working on being able to shoot. They're working on playing as a team and being in their role. And if you expect them to get outside of that role, it's very difficult to do. And I don't want to say very few, because there's a lot of really good AAU coaches that are focused on player development. But there's a lot of coaches that focus too much on winning and not player development. So what that do is that forces your player into a role that will help the team win, which again is good. You have to learn when to do that and when to fit in your role. But too many parents and players expect these AAU tournaments to help them become a better scorer and become the number one guy. That's not what the tournaments are for, right? If you want to be a better scorer, a better leader, right, then you have to develop those skills on your own. Playing in games is not going to help you develop that many more skills, right? It's the hours in between the games that help you build the skills, and then the games just help you figure out when to apply them. And I think that's where a lot of people get messed up. So again, I don't want to sound like I hate AAU. I think tournaments are awesome. It's super fun to go and have 30 teams playing in the same building at the same time, and it's pretty awesome. A lot of fun, but don't expect that to help your player or you get to the next level, right? And AAU is mostly for recruiting, right? So that college coaches don't have to go to a bunch of high school games to see one kid on each team. They can see the best players in the same tournament playing at the same time against the other best players, which is good. But the chances that they're coming to look at your player are very low, right? Unless you're like very high level. But so many parents take their kids to these AAU tournaments and the coaches could care less, right? If you're not the number 1 or 2 guy on your team, especially coming out of Utah, chances are they don't really care. So keep that in mind. But again, I think it's important to have an off season where it's different than playing games and team practices every week. And I think it's, one, it helps you break up the monotony of the entire year-round basketball season that is now our reality. Right? If you take time off and don't play basketball at all, then you're falling behind other players. So you can't just take time off, but I think it's important to switch up your routine and spend your off season doing off season stuff and not pretending like it's a season or more of a season. I've had a couple of players that are playing 17 to 18 games a week, and that is, one, not good for burnout. They love the game, so they still do it. But two, for injuries, and that's the other part of the off season, is building your body so that it can withstand the season. And so many players are just spending the entire off season wearing their body down, and they never get enough time to recover. And so when they go into the season, they are already worn down, and then the grind of the season kind of, beats down on them more. So we see some injuries, and kids are pretty resilient. So, a lot of times they get away with it and they're fine. But I think it leads to breakdown and wear of their body later on. So we can't just, expect them to bounce back because they're kids. We have to let them kind of heal, and not only heal, but train and do like strength training. And that doesn't mean weightlifting, right? It doesn't mean full on like bench press and squats and stuff like that. But some mobility stuff, some injury prevention stuff, so that when the season comes, they're not tired and worn out, and they don't get injured and miss time, right? The best ability is availability, and too many players are so worn down after the summer because they're playing so many games. And then they go on vacation where they're not doing any basketball and try and come right back and play 15 to 17 more games the next week. So I think it's a little out of hand sometimes, and that's mostly why I wanted to just shoot this video, podcast, whatever it is, just to kind of share my thoughts on that, because I think AAU is awesome. I think every player should be on an AAU team, learn how to play on it as a team, play with other players, learn how to win. Winning habits are good. But again, people go over the top way too much. And so I just want to make sure that you understand, whether you're a player or a parent, that AAU is not the main factor of success. Playing on the best AAU team is not going to help your player be a better scorer, right? If they're already a scorer and you want to see how they do against really good defenders, then that's going to help, right? But if they're not a scorer, if they're a rebounder and that's all they do on their team is rebound, and you're taking them to an AAU tournament so that they can become a scorer magically, that's not going to happen, because you're playing a game and you're going to do what makes you most comfortable and helps your team win. So make sure that you're using your time wisely. Not only using your time wisely, but your money wisely, right? So if you're paying, $400 to $500 to go to these tournaments, just think about how many sessions of athletic performance training that could get your player, and how much more beneficial that would be than going to every single tournament every weekend that you can find, right? And so I think that's much more beneficial. And again, just the time thing is you don't have to drive, you don't have to pay for hotels, you don't have to do anything there, and they're still getting what they need out of their off season. Now again, yes, 1 or 2 tournaments, go somewhere fun, have fun with the tournaments, do it, but don't go overboard with it, and spend time on stuff that really matters as opposed to the flashy stuff or the things that people say will get you better but actually don't. And again, I want to make sure that you understand that I love AU, I love tournaments, but don't go overboard with it. So that's just some thoughts I wanted to share. I think it's really important to make sure that we're spending our time and energy in things that will actually help our kids and our players get better. There's a balance between working and having fun. Games are usually more fun than workouts, which is something I'm trying to improve and learn how to do better so that kids love working out and not just playing in games. But again, off season, you can still play games, but I think like pickup basketball would be way more beneficial in the off season. And that's what the pro guys do in the off season, right? They play pickup, they play in pro-am leagues, because it's unstructured. They can kind of take it easy. At the same time, they're still working on stuff. When they're playing in a pro-am game, they can shoot whatever kind of shots they want because their teams switch every time, so they're not the main guys. Sometimes they are. I think there's a lot of benefits to pickup basketball, and I think AAU basketball has really kind of destroyed that in the summer. So I would say get some pickup games going, go to a couple AAU tournaments, spend the rest of your time developing your body and your skills, so that you can really get the most of your off season and make sure it's actually an off season, not just an extra season during the summer. So those are just some thoughts. Again, I may be wrong on some stuff, but just wanted to share what I've been feeling as I've watched tournaments and seen players miss workouts because of tournaments. Really important to make sure we have that good balance. So keep that in mind. Make your off season a good off season. Have fun, but make sure you're spending time and energy on the things that actually make you better. So